And my next guest is Reza Pahlavi. He's an Iranian opposition figure and the son of Iran's former leader, the late Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. His father was deposed in 1979 and fled the country following the outbreak of the Islamic Revolution. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
So you have called on the Iranian people to rise up and oppose this regime. A lot of Iranians are doing that. A lot of them are being killed by the regime. Are you confident that this uprising will work?
Jake, first and foremost, I must say that unlike previous campaigns, and as a continuation of it, this time the people came to the streets because they have had it with this regime. It's a true revolution. But the regime, unfortunately, has started waging war against its own citizenry. Defenseless people that were shot by military weapons, they are chasing them now in hospitals, finishing the job of wounded people, raping women in their homes. The amount of brutality that has happened has been unprecedented, but the resolve of my compatriots is still there. It started from the bazaar in Tehran and quickly spread to the four corners of Iran. Millions of people came out. Millions of people started protesting death to the dictator, asking for their liberty. And this is a movement that will ultimately succeed. We had a stumbling block, which was the regime panicking, cutting us from the world by shutting down the Internet, making communication impossible. But the news has trickled out. And as of yesterday, when I spoke to a few of our political prisoners, they were telling us the amount of casualties that we thought would be not as much as was originally reported, but Tehran alone had over 15,000 people killed, and I think across the country is well over 20,000, maybe even more than that.
Obviously, it's the fault of the regime, and we all hope that the Iranian people get the government they deserve and democracy and freedom. Obviously, it's the fault of the regime, all these deaths, but do you feel any responsibility having called for this uprising?
When they called me to step in, millions of people chanted my name, asking for my leadership, for my return. And it is in support of the movement that we called for maximum togetherness so that they are not spread as a crowd. And it started pushing back elements with the regime. As a result of it, we started to see some initial refusal to go back to work. There were members of the police force who didn't show up to work, some military elements. Even the regime killed a few policemen who refused to engage with the people. So we already see the momentum shifting. The regime panicked and as a result created this blackout. But the momentum might have slowed down in terms of people being able to continue beyond the street. But we know that once the regime is hopefully targeted in terms of its force of repression being neutralized, if indeed, as President Trump announced, there will be some retaliation for them doing what they did to the people, that will give people another opportunity to then finish the job at the end. People are committed to do that. Millions of people have died. And you know the biggest message that they wanted me to convey to our viewers is that they are not fighting this fight for themselves. They are fighting for humanity and liberty all around the world. That's the Iranian people who are, unlike this regime, has always been anti-Western, anti-American principle. Iranians want to have the best of relationship with America. And we had it before.
And you know that there are a lot of Iranians who hate the regime who are also critics of yours. And I want to give you an opportunity to respond to some of their criticism. One of them is that you say you want to unite the Iranian people, but you weren't able to keep a coalition of like-minded Iranians together at Georgetown. That group quickly disbanded. Why do you think you're going to be able to unite the country?
Well, first of all, you have right causes and the wrong players. But when I was in Munich 3 months ago, we had a conference that had the widest spread and diversity of representation of its kind as part of the unity movement. We had people from the left, people from the right, Republicans, monarchists, socialists, representative of ethnic groups, representative of religious minorities, athletes, artists, that were all gathered there. And the principle is very simple, Jake. What are we united on in terms of the core principles?
Ending the regime.
But there are four key principles that you said like-minded. How do we define it? First and foremost is Iran territorial integrity, which is very important. Number two is separation of church from state as a prerequisite to democracy. Number three is, of course, equality under the law of all citizens and individual liberties. And all of this so we can conduct free elections, so it's the Iranian people who determine the outcome. I'm stepping in as a leader of transition at their call. My job is to make sure that we can see this through. We have a plan for the post-regime collapse to stabilize the situation, allow maximum defections, keep the most of the bureaucracy intact so the country continues functioning, and then prepare the grounds for the election of a constitutional assembly where whatever opinions people may have, they have a chance to debate it, and be presented with a constitutional project and then be ratified by referendum.
On that matter of continuity in government, last summer, July, you announced that more than 50,000 officials from the military, from the Iranian government, had submitted to a Google form that you set up that they wanted to defect from the current regime. Did you verify those numbers? Do those names, is the number still 50,000? And where have those defectors gone? What happened to them?
It's more than that. 2 days before the internet shutdown, we have over 100,000 people, new applicants to a platform that we had created a few months before, adding to the numbers that had already started joining. Among them, you find members of the military, paramilitary, police forces, but also a lot of people who are in the civil bureaucracy, working in ministries and so on and so forth, diplomats and others. And we're beginning to see signs of more and more people, refusing to go back to work or literally defecting. It is very important because it's part of our process. You see, one of the lessons learned from de-Baathification in Iraq was really a bad example of how you manage a change of regime. And in the case of Iran, you don't have the problem you saw happen there in the de-Baathification. We are trying to be inclusive as much as possible of all those who can survive regime change and have a place in the future, except for the people who have their hands soiled with the blood of the Iranians, and they will have a count in the court of justice at some point. But the majority of them can survive that change and have a place for them tomorrow.
So lastly, sir, President Trump's position vis-a-vis the Iranian people, he keeps threatening that he'll take action if the Iranian regime keeps killing innocent Iranians. They keep killing innocent Iranians. At one point he said, I was told the killing stopped, but it hasn't.
Unfortunately, it hasn't.
Do you think what he's doing, his position, separate and apart from the nuclear strikes, has been helpful? Is it beneficial?
It's the expectation of a nation, because a lot of people took courage in the words of a president who said, I'm not going to be another Barack Obama. I'm not going to throw you under the bus. And people took that very seriously. And in fact, a lot of people now are hoping that in this totally unfair conflict where the regime is massacring them and they have no choice to defend themselves because they are unarmed, something is going to tilt the balance in their favor. And the best way to do that and save lives at the same time is to strike the regime when they are the most vulnerable and at the same time their instrument of repression. We're talking IRGC, we're talking instances that is collectively their instrument of repression, but there can also be additional aspect to that, economic isolation of the regime. And I think a lot of governments now in Europe are considering bringing even more sanctions on the regime. This is a time to act. I think the expectation of the people who have bravely gone to the street, many of them have died, that they haven't died in vain. They expect the world this time, beyond just condemnation, behind resolution, actually take steps to put the pressure on the regime.
So just to be clear, you're saying that you think it's time for the U.S. and the West to act beyond just words with economic sanctions that are tougher, but also military strikes against the Revolutionary Guard.
There's no other way to help unarmed people when they're facing this level of brutality that the regime has exerted against them. The only chance is to see a cavalry that arrives and we can hold the fort up to a point. At some point, we need to get that air cover, and that will change the balance in favor of the people. Okay. Hopefully, Iranians will be able to liberate themselves.
All right, Reza Pahlavi, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.